Welcome to the Retrograde video game podcast, where this week we celebrate the sounds rather than the sights of video games.
Wow, my name is Andrew Bascom, and with me as always is the mustache daddy of podcasting, Mr. MDOP.
Mikey Stroh, Aaron Word.
Oh, Mikey Stroh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Clark from Raleigh, for this week's of podcasting drop.
Raleigh, is that where the Caps come from?
Yes, they do.
The Washington Capitals?
Yeah, no, you meant the Raleigh Caps?
What's going on?
How many layers in? Can we get into this?
That one I do like. Say that again, the mustache daddy.
Mustache daddy of podcasting.
The mustache daddy of podcasting. If you have a submission that you would like to pose for my name, Mikey, as the what of podcasting.
Because you were the bad boy forever.
Formerly the bad boy of podcasting, yes. Mr. Bebop himself.
Nay the podcasting.
Yeah. I thought you were...
Thank God we've retired the horse bit, because otherwise...
Horse bit. You know how I used to... Here's the thing about the horse bit, and if you're a new listener to this podcast, take a break, because...
Take a seat. We'll see you in 5.
We used to have the horse bit on this podcast, where we'd have to play horse drop every time. We retired that over on the Patreon, RIP, and every time you and I could see it in our eyes. Mm-hmm. Anytime we could see ourselves going towards... mentioning a horse or something, we would both tense up, because whoever was editing that week, we wouldn't want to be like, I gotta put a fucking drop in here again.
Looking at the time, going, oh God. Or do we just avoid it? Like maybe neither of us realized we made a reference to a horse.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we knew we had to retire it when at the end of some episodes we'd be like, you dropped a horse reference there. And we're like, we didn't.
I know. I just didn't say anything. I know. Yeah.
So where do they send those to, Andrew?
You can send it to the Retrograde Podcast at gmail.com.
Yes, you can.
Or you can DM me at Retrograde Andy.
At Retrograde Andy. And you know what you can also do for the Retrograde Podcast at gmail.com? You can send us episode suggestions, as was the case with today's episode.
Okay.
This was recommended actually on our Instagram, Mac and Cheese King, aka Neutral Pilk Hotel, a name that I adore.
Love.
So you can submit your episode recommendations, and today's episode is going to be our top 5 favorite soundtracks, video game soundtracks of all time. We're going to give an example of one of the songs that kind of epitomize the soundtrack of each of the games that we're talking about, and we're going to try to splice in some of the music as well. We're gonna make things a little difficult on ourselves in the editing process, but
make big promises now.
Make big promises. And you know what? Here's the thing: if I'm editing this, I can always just edit this part out if I get too lazy.
If you don't hear any music later, it's because you didn't hear what we're saying right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, we're starting kind of a new editing process in general on this. I know a lot of our listeners only listen on Spotify. You kind of get stuck in your habits. If you've never checked us out on YouTube, or even if you have, and you got kind of bored with the format of 2 static videos side by side with one another on the screen, episode by episode, we're going to start filtering in some episodes that actually cut between you and me talking. Yeah. So it's going to look, and if you're watching this on video, you're going to see exactly what we're talking about. Right now I'm talking.
And now I'm talking.
And now I'm talking.
But now I'm talking.
Oh,
very
God.
Good, yeah.
Andrew, that was great.
Yeah.
And I'm sweating by all the editing.
It's like watching tennis.
Mac and Cheese King has a question, Andrew. Because he also thinks you're a music head. And he brought this up, and I was like, I've known Andrew a long time. I don't know if he is a music head or not.
I actually think I'm probably the opposite.
I kind of thought so too.
It's not that I don't like music. It's that I think there's so many people that know so much about music that I feel like it's a lifestyle that I do not participate in.
It's a lifestyle of the rich and the famous, as Good Charlotte once said.
One of our best.
One Canada's best?
Yeah. No, they're not Canadian.
Aren't they?
No.
I think they are.
No, they're not.
Well, then who is ours? White people? Is that what you're saying?
One of our best, I think, humanity.
Oh, ours as in humanity.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But you're on thin ice.
Okay. Watch yourself, counselor.
Watch yourself. So thanks for the recommendation, Mac and Cheese King. Again, you can do that. Send your recommendations to the Retrograde Podcast.
Thank you for thinking that I am a music head. That's very nice. I'm glad I come. You know what the worst part is? Is it like that John Cusack movie? Like that? Like I'm just
High Fidelity.
That I'm just a super judgy asshole. That they're like, yeah, you seem like you like music. I'm like, fuck.
The problem with someone thinking that you're a music head like that is like you said, like they probably get it from somewhere. So maybe you made like a very pretentious comment at one point about music.
Let me know what I did, because I'd love to keep that up. Yeah. By the way, Good Charlotte's from Maryland. Beautiful state. Crabs.
I was going to say, what city though?
It looks like Waldorf.
Oh, I was going to guess that.
You were going to guess Waldorf, Maryland?
I was going to guess Waldorf,
a place
Maryland.
I'd never heard of before up until they're reading this.
Because I think about the Waldorf Astoria a lot.
Yeah, where's that?
That's in New York.
Yeah, that's in New York.
Yeah. No, but I think about it a lot.
Oh, you think about it a lot?
And then the name comes to mind.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what if I can apply that to other states?
Can I mention this? The Waldorf salad Have you ever had a Waldorf salad?
Yeah, that has like pecans and a little sweetness.
Very good. There's grapes in it too.
Grapes.
That is named because it was made in the Waldorf Astoria.
Really?
And I always think that is fascinating that you could create something that they're like, oh, that's just, you know it for this other thing. And you go, no, it's actually named for the place you know too. And you're like, no way.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's why people call bad podcasts Mikey podcasts.
Yeah, they go, that must be a Mikey podcast. It's a genre.
It's a genre of them.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I'm happy to know that.
There you go.
Before we get into this, the soundtrack shenanigans,
yes,
that we've promised to the listener, Andrew, I wanna catch everyone up. What are you laughing at?
I just have another Waldorf fact.
Okay, yeah, no, give us a Waldorf
off
fact.
the top of my
head.
Yeah,
I love Waldorf
if you're watching
facts.
video, the Muppets,
Waldorf and
Statler are named after two famous hotels that are in New York City, and one of them is Waldorf because the Waldorf Astoria.
And they notoriously laugh at people.
Well, they're cranks. They're old cranks that yell from the sidelines.
No, I mean the hotels themselves.
Well, they're old.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Were they at the time of the Muppets though? Because the Muppets are old as dirt.
They are. Their Muppets are from the 70s. I would imagine so. I imagine they were probably over
1800s.
Yeah, probably something like that. So they're definitely
haunted.
Thank you very much. Absolutely.
For sure.
You and I raced to get out haunted.
Unlike my condo though, although I realized my condo building is now 12 years old. We're inviting the potential for ghosts. Like at what point do ghosts start moving in?
So, but okay, wait. Oh wow, there's a lot there that I want to break down. Sorry, you stopped me right in my tracks.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be possible the day after your condo opened? Okay, so just to catch everyone up, Mikey moved into a new condo that had never been a condo before because he was so sure that meant there would be no ghosts in his condo.
For a couple reasons.
And those would be?
Well, one, it's too new. People haven't died.
Right.
And if they have, I don't think they've like materialized as ghosts yet. I think that takes a little bit of time.
Okay.
Two,
okay,
it's too high up. The condo is too high up. So if in Toronto, where I live, and you live as well.
I do
loyal listener. What? If people, like back in the day, the 1800s was like prime ghost time. We know that. Most ghosts are from the 1800s.
Right. I appreciate how much you're throwing out that you treat as facts. We all know that.
When you talk mathematics, you assume all of it's fact as well. I mean, I know these things to be facts.
Good point, Terrence Howard.
Most buildings did not go. Good reference.
Thanks.
Most buildings didn't go beyond like, I don't know, 2 stories back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So I live above that. So the ghosts, like if a building was demolished, the ghost stays on that plane.
Right. That makes sense. Ghosts are famously land beings that definitely have legs that are stuck to ground.
No, it's not ground. It's that if you died on the second floor, then your ghost is always floating at that height.
They can't go up or down?
No, unless they take stairs. But then that brings in a whole problem because if the stairs are gone, if there were ever stairs when they were alive, they could have taken them and they can in the afterlife.
Because they're aware of them.
Yeah, it lives in their ethereal plane.
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Everything gives off energy.
Yeah, and energy never dies. And yes, that's everyone loves that one. But wouldn't it be true that so the building's 12 years old now? Oh, you've been living here 12 years?
No. I've been living here just about 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, it's still crazy.
Jesus, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be true the day after they open that they could have ghosts? Like day they open, somebody moves in, has a heart attack, drops dead.
Yeah.
Ghosts.
It's just limiting the potential for that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. It's like you're like an insurance adjuster, like you're limiting liability.
Yes.
To
I
ghosts.
was underwriting the haunted nature of this building. Yeah.
Very good.
There was someone on a few floors above me. Actually, I hate to say this for anyone in Toronto who goes by the theory that higher levels of condos are less likely to be haunted, because there was someone on the 7th floor of my building that did die. So any building that's built there here on this space now, from now until eternity,
including this building,
might be haunted on the 7th floor.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I'm taking the elevator, I actually, most buildings etch out the 13th floor. I pull out the 7th floor.
Go 6 to 8.
Go 6 to 8. Exactly.
Oh, that is tremendous. That is
going 6 to 8. Going 6 to 8, by the way, is what happens when I'm like kind of turned on.
I walk around kind of hard all the time, and then I go to 8, and I'm like, well, I'm interested. I'm curious.
Yeah.
That was a nice insight into Mikey's twisted mind. So how did we get here in the first place?
No, you were talking about the haunted nature of this building.
Yes.
We were trying to get to video game conversation.
Yes, we're trying to get video game conversation.
Surprisingly, we haven't been able to get there.
I'm not going to talk about Alan Wake now because that's the segue, because we're going to probably devote a whole episode to Alan Wake.
Yes.
I gotta just tell you, the little spectral spirit things.
Oh yeah,
not scary, annoying.
Oh, do you think so?
I always, because they're everywhere, right?
They're everywhere.
If you don't know
if
this,
you're Alan Wake,
in Alan Wake 2, when you're walking around, there's these black transparent figures that shine light when you have a flashy flashlight, but they're outlines.
They're like shadow figures, kind of.
Shadow figures. Yeah. And they move, and sometimes they chase you, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they turn into real zombies.
95% of the time, they can't hurt you. Yes. They're just there.
Yeah.
5% of the time, they can.
Yeah. 5%
and they turn
of the time,
into,
Yeah, like an actual being that will try and attack you.
Yes.
And so most of the time, you just walk around, but there's no rhyme or reason for it. It just seemingly happens when it happens. And I find that to be annoying. And I know you were like, that was scary. I don't find it scary at all. I always find it like
more tense, more tense than scary.
They're so omnipresent. They're always there. Yes. That's why it doesn't like.
That's why it's an interesting tactic. I can see it being annoying.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting tactic because it forces you to always be a little on edge. And not on edge in a way where you're like, there's going to be a jump scare because the screen's going to change to someone's face like Alan Wake does all the time.
Which does happen.
It's more like you can never quite feel safe. Even when you're like going back and revisiting areas, the masses of these shadow figures will come back. Very seldom will they start attacking you if you've already cleared them out, like the dangerous ones, but like still every so often they will. And that I found to be a very interesting video game mechanic that I hadn't seen before.
Right. We will continue that conversation on an Alan Wake episode.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about video game wise?
Honestly, gaming wise, I've been, I mentioned that I beat Psychonauts 2.
Yeah. That's exciting.
I haven't done a ton since then. I tried a couple little games here and there on my Steam Deck, but I'm kind of at that point where I'm struggling to find a game that's really like getting my attention. I downloaded recently because there was a summer sale going on the PlayStation Store. Have you heard of Sifu? The game Sifu?
Yeah.
So this is something that has kind of had my interest in a while, for a while since it came out, I think a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago, maybe even more at this point.
Wow.
But it's like a Kung Fu story, and it's like live your Kung Fu dream. It starts off like every Kung Fu story where your dojo essentially gets ransacked by these evil people, and you're a kid who witnesses it. They think they kill you, but they don't.
Right.
And now you have to go get revenge. It's your life goal to get revenge on them. Kind of like a Kill Bill sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now the difference is...
Or 100 other movies.
Or 100 other movies. Probably more than 100 other movies. The interesting thing about this one is every time you die, you age. But you can come back to life right then and there. It's, the mechanic of death is explained by this talisman that you have, so you come back to life. But now you're 3 years. Yeah, exactly. It's it's a MacGuffin. It's just a fucking MacGuffin. The interesting thing about it is as you get older, you get a little bit less life, but you get a little bit more powerful. But you can only live to like age 76 or something like that. So
average age of man.
Average age of man, especially a man who's dedicated his life to slaughter.
And getting punched and kicked.
Yeah, punched and kicked a lot. Yeah. Do you think that would limit how long? I feel like that would make you live longer for some reason.
Really? Do you know famously long-lasting fighters that have lived like long years?
Leon Spinks, Muhammad Ali.
They're doing great.
They're doing great. They're doing great.
Let's check on. Oh God. Oh no.
Oh God.
Oh no. Yeah.
No, but it's an interesting premise. It's very combat heavy. It's very limited in the cutscenes, which I've grown to appreciate in games that I just want to like pick up and jump in and play. And I know a lot of people really, really love Sifu. A lot of people have spoken very highly of it. The combat is what I've struggled with a little bit, where I'm coming off of beating Sekiro not too long ago, and that in my mind is like one of the greatest combat systems I've ever played. The parry mechanic is very responsive. You always know when you've succeeded and failed, and I find with Sifu the visual and audio cues to tell you when you've successfully dodged or parried or countered they're just off a little bit. Okay. They're a little soft in a way that I'm sure some people appreciate because they're not as like in your face, but I'm finding a little bit harder to get used to as I get used to the combat itself. Cause it feels like I'm really treading water and kind of like just trying to figure things out. And in the meantime, because it's so combat focused, I'm struggling a little bit. So,
okay, that's fair. All right. Well, do you think you're going to continue with it or no?
I'm not sure if I am. I'm on the lookout for other games. If you have any games out there that, people who listen to this podcast have heard a ton of the games that I've talked about and a lot of my likes and dislikes. I know there's some games on the horizon that I might check out, but if you have anything out there that you haven't heard me talk about and you think I might like, by all means, send me a suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm clearing out until Outlaws comes out, Star Wars Outlaws, which I'm definitely going to be playing a lot of.
Which when this episode comes out, should be launched, should be out.
Is it out or is it? Oh, it's going to be out?
I think it'll be out.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so we're recording this just slightly in the future here a little bit, but I imagine that will be something we're going to talk about very soon on this podcast.
And because it's the future, we should say, how bad we feel about how things turned out.
Right. God.
I didn't expect golf to play such an integral part of our I guess like mourning.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought the way that the victims perished to be, if it wasn't so sad, it would have been hilarious.
And I think the problem is I thought it was a put on at first when Phil Mickelson drove the golf ball through 7 straight people.
Yeah.
Like everyone knew where the hole was.
Right.
And so when he turned to the left, I was like, this has to be a bit.
There's a real choice he made that day.
Real choice.
I just didn't think he was going to be as influenced by the movie Problem Child as much as he was.
That was the surprising thing.
Yeah.
And it was the influence itself kind of caught me off guard. So if you can explain a little bit of the influence.
Well, like Mark David Chapman had Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah. Yes, he did. Oh,
and Phil Mickelson had the problem child, the titular problem child. And with
on
Gilbert,
on UMD as well, which is what surprised me.
That was also surprising, and I just thought, okay, well, no one saw that coming, but I'll never look at that movie the same way again.
No. Do you think it's because, and this is why I struggle with so much media attention that's being paid to Jake Paul.
Yeah.
When they call him the problem child.
Yeah.
It's
bad taste.
I just know that there's someone out there who's going to hear that.
Yeah.
And I've been saying this. There's someone out there who's going to hear that and is going to think they're talking about the movie.
Yeah.
And they're going to take lives with it in their back pocket.
Like Phil did.
Yeah.
Because that was a choice. You think he couldn't get more unlikable. And then that one Sunday.
I think Liv will still take him, though.
The ironic name, really, when you think about it.
It is. And when the announcer said that, and everyone kind of you could tell they wanted to laugh.
Yeah.
But this was right as the ball ripped through the 7th corpse. I mean, corpse after the ball ripped through it, obviously. It took a while.
Pretty instantaneous, though, when you think about it. Yeah, when the commentator said, we'll be back with more Liv, you could hear him off camera going, oh my God. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. Well, what was he supposed to say? We're going to be back with more dead. Come on, get out of here.
Come on. No, but we are, in the future. That was one of the games that I was talking about that I was going to possibly have some time cleared out for with Star Wars Outlaws.
Are you excited for that at all? Because it was on one of my most anticipated games of the year list.
You know those movies where there's a car chase?
Yeah.
And what?
I'm just saying we're predicting something that people already know about. So it's a little tough, but I just want to know more than what you think about it being good or not. Is it something you're excited for or not?
So, you know those movies where there's a car chase?
Right. I got deja vu. Yeah. yeah, I think I do.
The car stops at the last minute. And this is another one of those things like quicksand that I thought was going to be a bigger problem in my life than it ended up being. Was a car that's teetering on the edge of a mountain.
Yeah.
And you're just at some point in my life, I'm going to have to unbuckle my belt and turn behind to my terrified family and say, no one move a muscle.
Yeah. Don't breathe.
Don't breathe. And then I said that, and my son grew up and actually directed a movie and called it Don't Breathe. And my son's movie Alien Romulus actually just came out a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations.
It's what's his name? Don't remember. But anyway, so it's
you don't remember your son's name?
It was a long time ago.
Yeah,
it
was.
It was a long time
ago.
That's fair. He's disowned me.
yeah. We don't have a great relationship.
No. That's why he makes horror movies, Andrew. But I feel like I'm in that car that's teetering, and all I need is the right review or the right recommendation, and I will be all in on Star Wars Outlaws.
You didn't want to use a teeter-totter or something else? You wanted to use a car?
Well, how's a teeter-totter going to work?
Well, you're in the middle right now.
No one on a teeter-totter is just balancing in the middle.
Well, it could be 2 100-pound children on the edge, and then you just need one of their...
Do you see how you've complicated the metaphor?
I have not complicated the metaphor.
No. So now in order for this to make sense, rather than talking about a scene that we've all seen in movies countless times, I have to say, imagine there are 2 exact twins who weigh the exact same amount.
Okay, yes, and one is an angel with great strength, and the other one's the problem child. Oh my God.
Andrew, stop. No. Actually, Elliot, can we cut that bit?
Sorry, dude.
I know we talked about someone editing the soundtrack stuff in, and we can totally do that. But we can't bring the problem child in. And I know we usually, we're not afraid to get our feet wet in the political landscape.
Yes.
But that's a bridge I'm not willing to cross.
No. I can't get my feet wet in the blood of the innocent.
No. And there was a lot of blood of the innocent.
Oh boy, was there.
There's 7. And here's the thing. Not to make this about Phil Mickelson again.
Yeah, here we go.
But it's It's like in Hot Shots Golf when you purposely aim all the way to the left and there's like a little cheat where you bounce the ball off of a mountain and you get a hole in one.
Yes.
The fact that the ball went in is, I feel like, a part of the story that no one is talking about.
I know. It's actually miraculous when you think about it. It makes you wonder about the true intentions of God. But, you know, I also just thought the commentators saying, oh my God, Phil Mickelson for ace was like just
completely ignores the first 7 corpses.
Yeah.
And again, they weren't corpses when it happened.
No, they were not cadavers that he hit the ball through.
No, they weren't standing.
Alive.
Although and I guess now in this landscape, we have to bring it back to this. But yes, we've seen the conspiracy theory videos that they were corpses that were put there by the PGA Tour.
Yep.
And then this was all meant to frame Phil Mickelson.
Right.
But we know that's not true because the PGA Tour actually doesn't mind sports washing in Saudi Arabia.
Right. No, yeah.
Because they're now the same company.
They're now the same company. Yeah. They're not competing at all.
No.
God. God, that news. What a stupid, a genuine news article that came out, or like when that news broke, that genuinely bummed me out. And I was like,
so
why
much.
do I care? But it genuinely bummed me out.
It really did. And you know who it bummed out the most?
Rory McIlroy. Who's
yeah.
fucking put his neck out there and he's like, what? Oh, okay. You just gonna put a knife in my back?
I should eat crow. I should eat crow, I think.
Sounds good.
Crow.
All right.
The reason why I'm kind of teetering on the edge is I look at Star Wars Outlaws. You know what I like about this podcast is we make it sometimes so we can edit out, if we wanted to, 8 minutes of nonsense.
It makes you really wonder if that stayed in, what gets cut out?
Yeah.
Right? That makes you think.
Outlaws reminds me a lot of Shadows of Mordor, a game that I still think about a lot. In fact, I talk about as a game that I was ultimately disappointed in. Yes. But I think I have to kind of change my tune on that because clearly I got enough enjoyment out of it to use it as like a reference point for, a game that wasn't perfect, but that I still got a lot of time out of.
Yeah.
And I imagine Outlaws might be the same way. Now, the difference is when Shadows of Mordor came out, this Ubisoft style, and I know this is a different development studio, but this Ubisoft style of open world game where you find like a clock tower or a bell tower and you move around and there's points on the map and this and that open world style was a little bit more new back when Shadows of Mordor came out.
I agree.
So it's possible that Star Wars Outlaws will feel a little bit more like a reskin of the formula.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's enough.
Well, it probably won't though, because who made Outlaws?
Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Speaking of 6 to 8.
Oh, hello. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm really excited for it. I can't wait to be let down by another Star Wars property.
Yeah.
But like, it might be one of those ones. I love Shadow of Mordor. It was honestly, I played so much of that I wonder if this is gonna be one of those games that I'm like, they're like, it's not great. I'm like, oh yeah. I played 70 hours of it. Like,
that I can imagine. And the weird thing is, I've been watching these videos have come up recently on Assassin's Creed Valhalla for some reason.
Yeah.
And
I like Valhalla.
Or sorry, Odyssey, I think.
Which is the Roman one.
Yeah. The Greco-Roman one. And that one, for some reason, I've been watching it and I'm like, maybe I have it in me to play another Assassin's Creed game. It's been long enough where I haven't played one of those open world games that maybe I don't hate the formula.
Yeah.
I just think it's a little bit, it has saturated the market a little bit. Maybe Outlaws is the one that'll get me back into it. I'm not saying no.
Yeah, I liked both of them. I liked Valhalla more. I played both of them. The Odyssey, I just found like a little bit glitchier. And this is the problem with the Assassin's Creed going like, that map is going to be gigantic.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work as well. Whereas you almost crave those times where it's like, let's go back to a small Italian town.
Yes.
And everything's dense. And that's like more fun.
That.
So
I love that.
It's a little bit of both. But yeah, I'm sure we're going to be talking about it soon. So that's, more stuff to look forward to.
Before we get into the soundtracks, I have one quick thing that I want to touch on.
Please.
Which I found kind of interesting. So I recently read, and I know our listeners hate when we talk about, I'm sorry, Andrew, but I have to say the word. Books. Andrew, I'm so sorry.
Okay,
he swallowed that back up.
Wow. Yeah, I got to rally.
I read the longest book I've ever read in my entire life. It was Stephen King's The Stand, the extended version. It's over 1,300 pages long. It's too long.
You didn't even let me get in there. I was going to Goodnight Moon or something like that. Fuck. God damn it. The Stand. It Stand's a famously very big book.
So it originally was about 600 pages.
Wow.
Because Stephen King wrote it as 1,300 and the editor is like, hey, that's not going to work. But it was such a successful book that and Stephen King became so successful in his own right that they had decided to allow him to release this 1,300 page book. I read it. I probably should have read the 600 page book. It's good. everyone who knows anything about me knows that I don't love things that drag on too much. This definitely does. But I was looking for a new book to read because I was done The Stand, and I started to like do some digging, and I was like, you know what? I've been thinking a lot about Disco Elysium a lot recently.
Yeah.
Again, it just kind of, that's a game that has stuck in my head and hasn't left.
Sure.
And I was like, what about, I'm sure Reddit has a post somewhere that is books that remind people of Disco Elysium.
Isn't that guy an author though?
He started off as an author.
Oh, okay.
He wrote a book called A Sacred and Terrible Air, I think it's called. It was originally written in, I don't remember the language, but it's
Romanian or something like that, right?
Yeah,
it's like
something along those lines.
I shouldn't just take a guess, but I believe he's Eastern European.
He's Eastern European, yeah. And it was translated by fans in 2 different versions. I tried reading that one, and it's just, I just struggle to read translations, especially when I know they're not like signed off by the artists themselves, because I'm like, I don't know if this is capturing their tone or not. Sure. So I had trouble reading that. But instead, I found this list of books, and there was this one book called Roadside Picnic, and I started reading it, and I'm like, fuck, this sounds familiar. Like, everything about this sounds familiar. Not in a Disco Elysium way, but in this kind of like post-apocalyptic, sort of like gritty, end of the world way. It reminded me of the game Stalker. Oh. Which is a game that apparently has a sequel that should be coming out anytime now, but has been delayed year after year.
So you know it's good.
You know it's going to be good.
You know it's got to be good.
But I loved Stalker, Shadows of Chernobyl. And eventually in the book, they start talking about the names of these types of characters they're following are called stalkers. And they go into these parts of the world which are, irradiated and almost like annihilation. They're like, it's like an alien kind of segment of the world that's been quarantined. And I found out that Stalker, Shadows of Chernobyl, was more or less based spiritually off of a movie which was made by, in part, the author of Roadside Picnic. So it was really cool just to tie it back to video games. A game that I loved. It was such a nice little surprise to be like, oh, this book that I've just delved into gives me some backstory on a game which I loved and kind of holds me over for the sequel.
Wow, how about that? And they say there's no more new original ideas.
No, they don't, and there aren't.
That's great. I'm glad you're really enjoying that.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm glad that you're glad for me.
Yeah. This information is going to pass over my head and I'll never think about it ever again. So I'm really happy we had this moment.
You know what's never going to pass over my head? The fact that you are happy for me. I'm going to think about it all the time.
It's not, what is that? The expression or something? It's not that it happens. It's the feelings that we have. Those are the ones that stay.
What?
The actual memories that we have are not things that happen. It's how it made you feel.
I don't think that's true.
Really?
Yeah, I remember tons of things that happened.
I was going to say, I think that's more true for you because you review things often on how you felt during them.
Yeah, true.
So like, I often think that is like more deeply influential to you than maybe anyone else.
Yeah, I won't watch a comedy if my back's hurting. I'm not going to enjoy it.
Because it'll make your back hurt because you're laughing?
No, because I won't laugh because my back's hurting.
Oh. I
watched Step Brothers once and my back was hurting.
And you don't like Step Brothers?
And I didn't like Step Brothers.
Oh, wow.
I rewatched it and it's good.
Yeah.
But it's
Adam Scott is so funny in that movie.
Adam Scott is amazing in that movie.
He's
amazing
so perfect in that movie.
So Andrew, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Soundtracks. How important, before we get into it, are soundtracks to you in media in general? Like, how much can a soundtrack have an influence on you?
Oh, deeply. I would say deeply, because there are soundtracks that I would say the middle part, who cares about that part? Because there's so many forgettable music things. And I'll get back to that.
The middle part? What do you mean?
Like, let's say like medium stuff. Like if it's between 20 and 80% of quality of soundtracks that are in media, who cares about that?
Sure.
Because a lot of that can be super forgettable, right?
Yeah.
It is really the ones that stand out because how bad they are.
Yes.
And the ones that deeply help and influence the media that you're consuming at the time.
Give me an example of a bad one. I'm so curious. Because you're a music head.
Yes, I'm a huge music head. Oh my God. I was just listening to a podcast and they're talking about The End of Us, which is a Blake Lively movie that came out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
That is based on Colleen Hoover's books. And if you don't know who Colleen Hoover is, it's because you're like me, but Colleen Hoover is probably the most successful author in the world right now.
Oh.
And she writes romance novels. And I'm doing the big hand thing with that. They're really just smut.
Smut.
Yeah, it's just
50
about
Shades of Grey style.
Yeah, 100%. And she writes just different versions of this. But good for her. She was like self-published for a long time. And they were saying this Blake Lively movie that just came out has a soundtrack that made people audibly laugh out loud during the movie. There was like a scene where they like finally got together and had sex, and it was to like Bon Iver, and people audibly started laughing, just going, "Oh, come on!" And I just think about that kind of stuff where it's like referees in sports. You shouldn't notice them.
Yes.
Until like for the most part, because if you notice them, it's probably bad.
Because they made a mistake.
Now, I will say one of the things that I really love is that the music should complement the art. It shouldn't stand out. It should make you feel things towards the stuff that you're seeing. And I have a lot of stuff on my list currently that I'm really excited to do.
I don't know that I agree with that necessarily.
That it's not supposed to accelerate how you're feeling towards the scene?
Sorry, no, that it's not supposed to stand out. That's the bit. I think that a soundtrack can stand out. And I think there's plenty of examples of movies, for example, and like a Tarantino movie. Right. The soundtrack is so front and center and sometimes is like so loud and punchy and used to sell a title card or something like that. And sometimes used in like surf rock in Pulp Fiction or something like that. Like shouldn't always work. You know, the opening title card is I
wonder how many times we're going to do this on the podcast where we're singing a thing that doesn't have vocals. And we're like, yeah, everyone knows it. Bee, boo, 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 boo. And everyone's like, what?
Everyone knows that one.
Yeah, well, that's the most popular song in the world. It's Happy Birthday.
But it's the best one.
Best.
But when that's done to a good effect, I think that's actually like a positive thing.
I agree. I can see what you're saying, but I often think when people are like, and then you know what song we're going to hear? That song that everyone loves. I think that often stands in the way of good things.
Okay. You can Scorsese dropping the Rolling Stones 3 times in a movie.
Well, you know what? I hate to say it, but he maybe is the person most like commonly tied with using popular music to influence, you know, the picture they're seeing, and also out of date because there's stuff that he's playing that is not around at the same time as the picture, like Casino or something like that, playing a 60s Rolling Stones song. You know, that's not, you know, you don't think about those two things together. I often think that the number of times you start thinking, oh, it's that song, I think that often, more likely than not, is probably bad for the game or the movie.
That I agree with. If the song takes you out of it, in the sense of being like, oh, I know this song.
Stars on me. Like, let everyone look at me. Yeah.
But if a song plays and I'm conscious of the fact that this song is making me feel more for the scene, I'm okay with that. I think a soundtrack can hit you over the head and still be good. Like it can be used for a purpose. But if you use, like, I think what you're saying more is like popular songs, like well-known songs that have attachments to other things outside of that movie, TV show, whatever, then that brings all the baggage. Like if any show or movie uses that Imogen Heap song, where were we? What
the Marissa Cooper got shot song.
Yes, exactly.
From the OC.
If anything, then you're thinking the OC and you're thinking that SNL sketch and you're thinking like,
what you say?
Yeah. So I agree though. I think like soundtracks for me are, I think it was Steven Spielberg who was like, it's 50% of the movie going experience is the soundtrack. And I think you're right in the sense that like a score can just be used to sort of like change the lighting of a scene essentially.
100%.
And in that case, it's great. But yeah, there are some where I've had instances where I wasn't enjoying a movie and then the soundtrack hits some sort of needle drop and I'm like, this is fucking good. Like this is it. Yeah.
And it's so funny where like we often talk about like the PlayStation 2 era of video games and how often the number of times that we've done games on this podcast and we often go, oh, those games suck from this era. You know, what's really funny is that yes, graphically they were comically bad now. They aged out really badly. And you think about how much fun NES, Game Boy, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis games were good. And then you look at the modern thing and you're like, the modern thing's good too.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is often that the music in the middle is like a lost age where it's like, it's just not great. It doesn't sound good. It's usually out of place, whatever. But we think about that. What is it called? Bit chip?
Like chiptunes kind
of style music back in the day. And you're like, it's so perfect. It's simple. It's neat. It's clean.
Like the Pokemon battle song or something like that.
Oh, we'll get to it. So let's not name picks.
Okay. Sorry.
And then we do modern day music, which now is in like beautiful Dolby sound and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I think that often is the same way too, where we talk about it in whole. And I think there's no coincidence that we talk about quality of games in that period being bad.
Yep.
And guess what? The sound is really bad. And you're like, ooh, does that go hand in hand?
It might. Yeah. It very much might. I mean, I think there are a few exceptions to like good soundtracks in the PS2 era. Like I think a game like God of War had a really good one. Like the original God of War. They started, I think it was just that there was less, like as graphics got better, there was less of an understanding of like what makes games truly cinematic. So it started to get like edgelordy and like heavy metal as opposed to something that's a bit more toned down and ethereal. Yeah. And I think that was just a staple of the era of like PS2, late N64, PS1, that kind of thing that struggled with. But it's a good point. That era, as much as it struggled with graphics, also I think did struggle with soundtracks.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think we just got lost in the sauce a little bit of like, what is this supposed to do?
Yeah.
You know? And I think so often that video games are different than movies because video games you spend so much more time with.
Yeah.
You're inside these worlds for so long. The music, I often think about it like, if anyone's seen, it's a Tom Hanks movie called That Thing You Do.
Oh.
Where they're playing, essentially he is the manager for what will be the Beatles or like a one-hit wonder, right? And you have to hear their one hit 12 times in the movie. And they went to an open casting call and the guy from Fountains of Wayne, Adam something, I forget his name, he just passed away. And they used his song because the idea was, people have to not get sick of this. They have to like listen to it so many times that they're like, oh, it's that song I like. Okay, good. You know, and I think it's the same way when you do video games. It has to be something that you like. The number of songs, the number of soundtracks I have on my list here that are old because they've imprinted into my brain of not getting sick, but actually make me feel positive emotions of memory and nostalgia.
Yes.
It's like so powerful. So music can do that to you in a way that almost nothing else can.
And you bring up a good point to compare it to video games to highlight the issues with soundtracks in gaming, especially a game where it's repeating certain tones or elements of the soundtrack over and over again. Like not just the one hit wonder thing in That Thing You Do, but if you're trying to solve a puzzle and the music that's playing when you're trying to solve the puzzle is the same song, it's liable to drive you insane.
Yes. And it makes you hate that
like
game, or you'll have a negative like, oh, remember this fucking level?
Yes, exactly.
You know? Yeah.
So that's a real fine line that people have to cover. If it stands out too much, even in a good way, you're eventually going to get sick of it. But that's what I think the 8-bit era did so well, because they could only do so much. And yet when you're walking around in a game, I'm not going to say what game because I don't want to name picks.
No, you don't want to name picks.
But you're walking around and you're like going to throw a ball at an animal or something like that. You're walking through the tall grass.
A tennis game of some kind.
Probably tennis. Okay. Yeah. The same song is playing over and over and over again. And somehow instead of hating it, like you said, 20 years later, we're fucking loving it.
It really does say something. Now, like we say often when we do these lists, they're incredibly subjective. And it's because these games, it's no coincidence that there's a lot of these games that when we were kids really like stuck with us.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
And then, I don't know about you, but I have a couple of ones from different generations, but it was hard not to pick 5 from the Game Boy.
The Game Boy is just like what an era for gaming. So why don't we do this before we get into our picks? Why don't you give a couple kind of like factors that came into play when you were deciding which ones to take, things that you wanted to keep an eye out for, or ways you wanted to structure your lists, anything like that.
Yeah. So like Mikey said, we're going to name the 5 best soundtracks of that we really love. And we're going to highlight a song that kind of gives a reason for that, or, whatever, something exceptional in any way. You'll see it. There's 2 different versions of soundtracks that I've chosen. One is because the music is so integrated to the game, it changed the way I thought about video games and music in general.
Great.
They're inseparable. And then the other ones are
just like me and you.
We really are.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Are you crying?
Yeah, that's fine. Just give me a second. And then the other one is music that makes you transported into the video game. Yeah. Like it's almost that you can't. They're selling you a lifestyle that you were like, oh yeah, I'm sold.
Okay, I know what you mean.
You're not wearing an Oculus, but if you looked around, you're there. Kind of thing.
I have a pick on my list that I would compare that to as well.
Me too.
I'm curious to see how much of our list overlaps. One element of me making this list is I tried to avoid games that I thought you might pick.
You do a good job of that usually.
Because and in the way I wanted to do this, because I know your love of like classic games and how much they stick with you. I tried to go more modern and personal.
Oh, interesting. And
the way I gauged that was games that I would listen to the soundtrack to today.
Yes.
And that says a lot, because I'm also talking about scores. I'm not talking only about soundtracks with actual songs in them. I'm talking about scores of games and which ones I would listen to like while I'm doing work or something along those lines. So that I feel like helped separate out which picks I would eventually take from the ones that you did. And honestly, even doing so did align pretty closely with my actual favorite soundtracks of all time.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I'll say is I tried to make it a point not to lean too heavily on soundtracks with actual songs in them.
Yeah.
Because I did want to highlight a lot of, they are on my list, but I did want to highlight more than not video game scores and original soundtracks where
I'm with you. I think that's totally fair. I have a couple that have famous songs on it. Okay. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll start. I can do this. So, like we said, we're going to be going, our 5 favorites. I do actually have this ordered from 5 to 1. Oh. You don't have to, but I just kind of like to challenge myself to do it. And again, ask me, like, give me these on a list tomorrow and the order might change. I don't know, but I'm going to go with number 5. And this is a pick that I don't know that's going to be on a lot of people's lists. And the soundtrack itself isn't as comprehensively memorable as the main theme, but because of the main theme because it's so strong, I feel like I have to have it on the list. Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty is on my list.
Wow.
Now the main theme, and we'll splice that in as we go here, is one of the most iconic songs to the point, like for me personally, subjectively, to the point where when I am doing something epic in my real life, which I don't often do, this song is the one I'll hum to myself. Like the main theme of Sons of Anarchy.
Whoa, your favorite
is riding through this world all alone, which is a theme I do actually know. It plays constantly in my head. I love it. It's made such an impression on me. And if it's not the main theme, Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty and a lot of Metal Gear games also have these airy, kind of like anthemic songs, and then some almost James Bond intro-y songs like that pay homage to something like Goldfinger or something like that. So all throughout it, I feel like the soundtrack, especially in a game that's so cinematic as Metal Gear, the soundtrack plays such an integral part in kind of ensconcing you in the story that it's telling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. You know, obviously when we start doing these lists, you start Googling a little bit, just going like, okay, just want to make sure I didn't forget anything.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you do it, but I just, when we get the premise, I just write down everything I think of immediately.
I call that raw dogging it.
Yeah, I just raw dog the list.
Raw dog it.
And then I look for a little protection afterwards.
Yes,
and I go,
do too.
Okay, just making sure I'm not forgetting anything big here. But I agree with you. And this is one that I only saw on one list, and it did make me think, because the second I saw it, I thought of the title. And I was like, oh yeah, I know that. Like, you know.
Is this your pick or my pick?
This is your pick.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, I'm just supporting your pick. We're going like, oh wait, I do know that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Metal Gear. I'm glad that is represented on the list.
And I will say the main theme of Sons of Liberty is similar to the main theme of the original of Metal Gear Solid, not the original Metal Gear Solid, tactical espionage action. But I feel like it was a lot more was added to it, and kind of it was better produced in Sons of Liberty, so that's the one I went for.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. All right. So for my first pick of my non-ranked list, but this was the first thing I wrote down, is going to be The Last of Us.
Great pick.
Gustavo Santaolalla.
Yeah.
This one, I had to choose Last of Us because it did something more than going, let's put music on that video.
Yes.
They say it just incorporates the music into the game, that people actually play instruments. It actually shows a connection from one time to another, that the world is lost, but music stays on. And it also shows the connection between two characters, the main characters of the first one, and going into the second one too, that you can definitely include in there as well if you want. It's to show the connection that Joel had to his family, and then Joel has to Ellie. And even though he is not as verbal a guy, he shows her with love the things that he keeps close, and the things that he learned, and the things that he wants to show somebody else that he cares for. And I think that's really beautiful, and it shows the difference between the two of them. And I think the song that really represents that is called The Path.
The Path.
And so it just really makes you... there is one thing where the music could be playing and you could go, that's good music.
Yes.
But this music is so ingrained in the game that it's inseparable from the story of The Last of Us.
I love how you bring up music as a almost like plot device in The Last of Us, because there are also scenes in The Last of Us Part 2, you get a guitar to play. Yeah. And interesting mechanics to play the guitar, and people became really good at it. Yeah. But that is Ellie's way of kind of communicating her love to one of the main characters in The Last of Us Part 2 as well. Yeah. She sits down and plays the guitar, and as they're kind of on their journey together, I can't remember her name, but
Abby Johnson or Abby. What?
No, not Abby.
Oh, you're saying
her partner, like her love interest in.
It's like Diana
or Dina or something. Yeah.
No, sorry, I thought you were saying the vocal actor. When she learns aha in the second one.
Oh yeah,
that's so funny. And and not to spoil anything, but I think if you're listening to a video game podcast, you probably played Last of Us 2. It's in the second one. That's how Abby, God
Well,
damn it.
just careful because we promised not to ruin anything from The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to ruin it then. Okay, never mind. I take it back.
Yeah. Well, hey, watch The Last of Us Part 2, seasons 2 and 3 most likely because they're going to need to.
I know we're in the
past,
but they showed a trailer for that second season.
Yeah.
Looks good.
I'm excited.
Looks good. I don't know what to tell you.
Starting to see, like an aged Joel and all that stuff. Looks really good. Okay, that's a great pick. I love The Last of Us, a game that I was definitely circling on my list as well. I think music is so integral to it. That kind of like, I like the fact too that it feels like you could make the soundtrack using instruments you find in a post-apocalyptic world. Like it's very stripped down in that way.
Yeah.
My next one is, I've already brought this game up today, actually. It's a game that I spent a lot of time with. The MO of this game is making you feel whatever way the creator wants you to feel. If you don't feel it, the game doesn't work on you. And you're constantly feeling both confused, stupefied by the beauty of the world, almost hazy and in like a drug-like state. All of these are feelings that you're supposed to have when you're playing the game, and I think the soundtrack does such a good job of incorporating that based on how the developers want you to feel at any given time. It's Disco Elysium.
Oh, okay.
Now, when I started talking about this and I mentioned that I wanted to try to incorporate games that I currently listen to the soundtrack, I listen to, still to this day, I listen to the Disco Elysium soundtrack all the time. I think it's best represented by a song on the soundtrack. It's called Whirling in Rags 8 a.m. And this was a song that was taken from a band called, and not taken like stolen, but a band called British Sea Power has a lot of songs that were just used in this game. Not as their own songs, but they have a song where like the instrumental is kind of incorporated into the score of Disco Elysium. It's really interestingly done. You can buy British Sea Power's album, or you can buy the Disco Elysium soundtrack, and they are different, but they sound very similar in a weird way.
Oh, interesting.
The Whirling in Rags 8 a.m. song plays very early on into the game. It was at a time when I wasn't sure if I was going to be into like a point and click adventure. Turns out it took me a long time to get into it anyway. But when this scene happens, you're this policeman, you're hungover, you don't have your pants, you're missing a shoe, you don't even know your own name, you're struggling. And we've all been there at some point, drunk and hungover. And you walk down into the lobby of the hotel and this song plays, and it's after such a like heartbreaking, terrifying exchange you have with your own inner conscience, to have this beautiful song play in the opening of this almost dilapidated looking hotel is just such a good juxtaposition of emotions. And I think that's the best representation.
That's great.
Of it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Another game where you have to live in that world of music.
Yes.
And that's so funny because it does help sell the unknown nature of the characters and you trying to be in a different world. I always found that music to be like very atmospheric and like really sell that idea. And that's so funny to do that because my second soundtrack, it does a lot of that as well, but just in the most opposite way possible.
Okay.
This is going to be Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
I knew, see, this is what I purposely didn't have on my list because of you.
How could you not have this on?
Yeah.
The title of the documentary that just came out a year ago is Pretending I'm Superman.
Yeah.
The Tony Hawk video game story. The title of one of the songs is the name of the documentary. That is how much the music was important to Tony Hawk here. Like skateboarding was so new to so many people when these games first came out.
Yep.
We had watched the X Games and saw him do a 900. And that opened so many eyes to go like, oh God. And the game came out months later.
Yeah.
It was so new. But the colors, the people, the clothes, the skaters, and yes, the music sold a lifestyle to the player and transported them somewhere else. It made you feel like a skateboarder. It was opening up this world that you didn't know existed, and it made you one of kind of the cool guys. And it had so much music. It had punk like Melancholy. It had hip hop like Mos Def and Public Enemy. It had metal like Anthrax and Rage Against the Machine. It was just a wide ranging music that sold this idea and made stars out of musicians that had their own following, but opened them up to this huge world that they had, never seen before. I know songs because of this game, and that to me just has to be included then.
And similarly, like my player one who doesn't really play video games, used to play them a little bit, has Tony Hawk and its soundtrack as a reference point for video games. Yeah. Like you cannot overstate how much popular culture was saturated by Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yes.
And that's a perfect example of it. I was going to ask because I thought maybe you'd bring up Tony Hawk, the franchise. I like that you settled on number 2. I agree with you. I think that's the most iconic one. Of all of the Tony Hawk franchise, do you have a favorite song within?
Guys, what are we doing here? It's going to be Superman by Goldfinger.
Yeah, it's got to be.
That song is so linked to the game. It's impossible to separate the two. You know, like even just the bass line and the pickup in the beginning with the drums and just the vocals, it is enough to make you think ska is good. Like it's enough to make you go, do I like ska?
Do I like ska?
And then you start listening to more ska and you're like, no, I don't like ska.
I don't like ska. In fact, I don't even know if I like the Police.
There was a little bit for everybody. And I think that was what made it beautiful about skateboarding. It made it a beautiful world about skateboarding.
Yeah.
Is that they're like, everyone can kind of be in if you want to be. And you're like, oh, awesome. And so I just think the selling of the lifestyle of skateboarding and the people around it, I just thought you can't not do a soundtrack list and not include Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
An iconic soundtrack for sure. Do you think,
sometimes
debatable, that Sting's name is Sting because he was in the Police and there's like a police sting?
No, I don't, because the other ones aren't like Frisk and like
Stop.
The famous police thing.
Stop and Frisk.
Yeah. Shoot blindly is the drummer. Close eyes and shoot. No,
there's I'm not saying I don't like black people.
yeah. Whoa. I didn't say that. Don't put words in my mouth.
I'm sorry. Leave without pay or leave with pay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Manager's desk duty. Yeah.
It's a great pick. I love it. And I'm going to go with one that I think dovetails nicely with the Tony Hawk soundtrack. I'm going to go with one that I think went down in history, alongside Tony Hawk as one of the great soundtracks and was sold as a soundtrack, as like a box set soundtrack. The commercial was sold using songs from the soundtrack. It wasn't a score. It was all songs of an era.
Yeah.
And this template of making a soundtrack based on songs of an era in order to, similar to how Tony Hawk made you feel like you were part of the skate group generation, whatever. This made you feel like you were living the life of one Tommy Vercetti. I'm going with Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
Yeah. I have that on my list as well.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
So should we save it until you get to it?
No. Let's talk about it now. That's totally fine.
Okay.
I absolutely completely agree with you. And it's so funny where GTA 5 and San Andreas also have famously really good soundtracks.
Yes.
Like deep bench of soundtracks. But it's so funny that I think about this because it's a video game set in the 80s in South Beach. Vice City, Miami, but really was the glitz and the glamour of the 80s. And when the game came out, the 80s were like this lost generation. It was years before the music and especially the fashion and things like that would eventually take over again. And the thing is, I was born in the late 80s. You were born in the early 90s.
No, I was late 80s as well.
Oh, you're late 80s
I don't
too?
have any memory. I was 89. Like,
okay. So we're both late 85 plus. And that means our parents didn't really grow up in the 80s because they were having kids.
Right.
And so it's this weird lost generation of everyone that grew up around us doesn't have an impression of the 80s because we weren't taught about the 80s. You know what I mean? Watch the movies. Yeah, we heard some music, but it was this game that opened your eyes and went, whoa, what's this? The pastels and everything. And it was in a deep bench of the soundtrack, open your eyes to 80s music that I had never really experienced before.
And the deep bench of the soundtrack is an understatement. I mean, this wasn't just a bench. This was like a league's worth of rock. There was different genres of music with all the different radio stations. Every radio station had like multiple CDs within the box set of all the songs that they played. Talk radio as well, which was included on that. A lot of famous comedians got on there just to almost like record podcasts that would live on in eternity there. You bring up such a good point about the 80s though. My love for the 80s was sparked by Vice City and never went away. Did Vice City have more to do with 80s nostalgia than the world gives it credit for?
I think it does because it opened people's eyes to going like, wait, what is this?
Yeah.
Like the Don Johnson, like
Miami
t-shirt
Vice,
and t-shirt and blazer and white pants and stuff like that. And you're like, wait, what people do? What was this?
But Miami Vice was in the 80s, right?
It was, or it influenced the 80s. I think they're like deeply connected also because of Miami as well.
No, for sure. But I mean, Vice City being 20 years removed from the 80s. Like, was that the first step of us looking back on the 80s with nostalgia?
Yes, even though there is such a disconnect of like, there is a length of time in between Vice City coming out and then people liking the 80s again.
Yeah.
But I think it opened people's eyes to going like, is that how people dress?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the music was like, because the 80s were so specific in their dress and the music that it brought on a counterculture of Gen X and like Seattle grunge and all this kind of stuff, right? Look at me being a music head. And so I think people are like, well, let's bury that shit. Like keep that stuff down. It was like how people thought about disco,
True.
Years like in the same time period, we're like, fuck that.
Yeah.
That was awful.
Yeah.
And now we're like, hey, this disco kind of slaps.
It was kind of great.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome.
I
And I think it would be impossible not to think that Vice City, one of the most popular video games of those 20 years, didn't open their eyes to the 80s culture that people are like, hey, wait a second, does this kind of rock?
Yeah, I think so. It rocked and it rolled.
I'm so curious. What was the song that you wanted to highlight?
I went for the poster boy song of Grand Theft Auto Vice City, a song that I still listen to all the time to this day. It was in the commercial. It was I Ran by Flock of Seagulls.
Yeah, that's a great choice.
Yeah.
It's impossible. I did another one, so I'm glad we chose two different songs. Good. I did Working for the Weekend by Loverboy.
It's a great one too.
Like, you could just imagine running down the street of South Beach or in like, one of those really nice cars and you're dressed up as Tommy Vercetti and you're like, this fucking rocks.
What was the song? And I'm doing the thing that we said we wouldn't do, but it's like.
I don't know, but it sounds good. I like it.
That's a great one too.
Yeah, it's a great one.
In fact, the rendition that I give is like
better,
I think. That's probably something you could argue about a lot of 80s songs. I do like 80s songs.
Yeah.
I
think it's impossible, hopefully one of the things that I really love about, if we can make fun of current generations all I want, one of the things I really love about the current generation or the people younger than me is that they are so much more hopeful and authentic than our generation was raised to be like, the second you try, you're like, you fucking loser. Stop trying.
And trying's cool now. I like it.
Trying is cool and being earnest is cool.
And I've been great in this generation. I love trying.
You really missed. You really missed.
I really did.
And that's why I always hang out with the teenagers. Is that I really hope that we don't just throw away whole 10 years of music. It's like, do you like the 80s? It's like, of course there has to be something good that came out of it. You know what I mean? And I hope that earnestness of the current generation does that.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so too. Yeah. You don't have to enjoy everything ironically. Some of it can be sincerely.
Absolutely. It's like guilty pleasure shit. Why do you have to be guilty? Just enjoy whatever you want.
Just have pleasure.
Yeah.
Just jack off.
Hey, dude.
Just do it.
Mine's America, man.
So I guess I'll go next because we both did Vice City.
Yep.
So I'm going to go with my number 2 pick. We're getting in on the end. My number 2 pick this was like one of my most listened to albums of a couple of years ago from one of my favorite games of all time. My loving player one got me this on vinyl as a collector's edition item. I don't even know how she found it for my birthday a couple of years ago. I can't say enough good things about Death's Door.
Death's Door.
What did you think?
No.
I
think you're number one.
Another one.
I thought you're number one. I will say this is kind of the thing that I didn't want to cheat is that Mikey has this really nice vinyl wall where you have these stands that you put like 6 albums on.
Yeah.
And every time I walk by, it's right in front of the studio where we record here. And I always look at it and I've seen some video games up there and I'm always like, oh, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention it. I keep trying to find Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 on vinyl.
Oh.
Because it's the Neversoft eye.
Oh, wait! On the vinyl itself
is the whole thing is the eyeball.
That's cool.
It's Neversoft, right?
Yeah.
And you can't find it for under $200. And every time I'm like,
what a time for vinyl! Like, of course, unless there's a repressing of it, but I cannot imagine that.
So cool. Yeah. So I'm always impressed by the vinyl thing, and so I have seen Death's Door in there, and I've probably seen number 1 as well. But why?
No, you haven't. So I'll give a shout.
Really?
Actually, that one's in my honorable mentions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's a number 1 with a bullet for me that I had to choose, but this one. So Death's Door, I chose a song called that I think does a good job of reflecting the entire kind of spirit of the soundtrack. It's called Ceramic Manor.
Okay.
And I could have picked any number of songs on this one, especially like the first half of the soundtrack. I remember the first time I played this game, I was a little bit unsold. I wasn't quite as into that sort of isometric perspective, but I started to play it. I'm like, the combat's pretty good and the design is really good. And then the first time you kind of hit the open world area where the soundtrack kind of kicks in, it felt like I was on a mission. I felt like I was taking to an open plain with nothing but like a sword and just like, this was my journey to go on.
Yeah.
It did such a good job of drawing you in. David Fenn has done a couple other soundtracks that I'm a big fan of, Moonlighter being one of them. Anytime he's involved in a game, I think it is better for it. And if you haven't heard Death's Door, definitely go out there and give this one a shot.
Wow, that's really cool. Okay, Death's Door, amazing. All right, for my second last one that I'm going to list here, I'm going to choose the Pokemon Red Blue generation.
It's amazing.
How can you not? And this is kind of one of the ones we were talking about earlier, is that you heard these songs on repeat for hours on end.
Yep.
And yet, no, it's not like I hate them. Like I
not even close.
No, I'm like, oh, he's kind of rock.
Yeah.
Now there's so many to choose from. But one of the ones I wanted to start with was Route 4.
Okay.
And it could have been the battle scene. It could have been
Sing Route 4 for me.
No, we said we're not going to do that.
You should do it.
No, 100%. I'm not going to say
Sing Route 4 for me. Why are you almost saying words? That's not how you hum song. No, I'm being completely serious.
That's how you say it.
That's the weirdest way I've ever.
You've never heard it with lyrics?
I know that we want to go into a bit right now. I've never seen anyone. What are you doing?
I think that's the way people sing
you
songs.
Hum or you go dun, 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 dun. What is this? You sound like
it's talent, my boy.
You sound like The Sims. That's the
Sims. What I sound like? Kim Cattrall.
Skibidi Scatman.
Yeah. Watch that. That's a fun video.
That's my favorite video of all time.
No, Route 4. I can't tell you because of the raw number of hours I spent playing this game or because it's iconic, but this game is on repeat and you could choose so many of the songs. And they're all in the champions battle alone is like iconic.
Yeah.
The battle scenes in general, the opening, I just it is so good, and so much so that they convert it over to television.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, it's because it's iconic. Also, they're cheap. Is they were like, yeah, let's just do that.
Sure.
Yeah, let's just do that and put an orchestra to it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
And it sounds great when they do it that way too.
So goddamn good. Yeah. So the Pokemon first generation, and honestly, any of them, but I chose Route 4.
It's amazing that Pokemon has so many iconic songs, not just the game, but the show as well. Like how they just consistently nailed it time and time again. I wonder.
I do too.
Sometimes debatable. I wonder if is it that they are amazing songs, or if we have so much nostalgic reverence for Pokemon that those songs became better as a result.
Yeah, they're tied to like a very important time in our lives of having fun.
Yeah.
And they were the soundtrack of our life.
Yes.
I agree with you, but I also think those songs just kind of rock. So
that's true.
I don't know. I have no problem splitting my nostalgia of going like, that movie sucks.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Yeah.
This one's like, no, I think this is good.
I think the music is good. I think it's definitely good. I just wonder if it's great in the way that we remember it. And you know what? I'm just devil's advocating here. Yeah. I fucking love it, and I would argue that it is actually really good.
Right?
Yeah.
Because my argument would be if someone was to say that to me, going like, "Is it actually good?" I don't think so. I'm like, I don't care. Like
exactly.
I think it's good, and that's all that matters to me.
I remember it really, really well.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like I remember my pick, my number one pick. Similar to that feeling I got in Death's Door when I first took to the fields and felt like I was going on a journey. This was a journey of 3 dimensions, which I hadn't really had very many of. Not the first time I'd ever been in 3 dimensions, but one of the first times. And I remember the opening scene of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and seeing Epona taking to the field and just feeling like I can't believe I get to go on a journey with my buddy Link in this open field and run around, the soundtrack changing from scene to scene, from village to village. This was the hardest for me to pick a song for because there are so many good ones. But I think ultimately the one that I remember, even right now, I'm like, do I change it?
Oh, wow. Really? Eh?
And I think I'm going to change it. I think I am going to change it. I'm going to go with Kakariko Village. Just a perfect on repeat song you hear all the time when you're in there. It sounds like the sunset.
Yeah.
It sounds like if you were to score a beautiful sunset, that's Kakariko Village. The other one I was considering was the Song of Storms. But again, similar to the Last of Us, where music is an integral mechanism in the game. It's the Ocarina of Time. You play the music. Yeah. It had to be that the music was memorable and you'd want to play it and want to hear it over and over again. And they just nailed that.
See, that's so amazing. And my last one's not going to be very different. So I think it's actually kind of a nice segue. I couldn't not choose Mario.
I'm glad you did. I'm very glad you did.
I could not choose Mario. And I would find this to be very difficult because we all have a theme for Mario in our head, right?
Yeah.
And I think this would actually be a very interesting test about people's age.
Oh,
is going,
good point.
What theme
good point.
is it? And if I said to you, I'm put you on the spot though, which theme is in your head when you say Super Mario?
I think it would have to be dun 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 dun.
Right.
Dun, 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 dun,
and so that would be Super Mario Bros. I think.
That would be like the original Super Mario. Yeah.
Mine is always from Super Mario World.
Okay, yeah.
And the overworld. And so the song I really want to reference is the transition from the overworld, where you're looking down at the map, to the underworld. Yes, exactly. I always found that the optimism and bright colors that Super Mario World was really showing off at the time was that it was the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
It was this graphical interface that was so much better than it had been previously. They're no longer these little blocky characters. They're the wonderful, curvy, happy characters in the top floor, right?
I love my curvy Mario.
Yeah, absolutely. What a thick king he is. And uses that massive ass of his all the time. I love it. And big dumper. And is they show you how happy and everything's the plants are bouncing and stuff like that. And it's the transition to the underworld. No. And the like deep bass and stuff like that they use, I just think is one of the coolest things to sell the idea that going like, this is a scary place.
Yeah.
And as a kid, fuck did it work.
It did.
Up top, I was like, Yoshi's here. Everyone's happy. This is great. He's eating apples. Down here, everything's actively trying to kill me. And if for some reason it was more scary, and the music played such a huge part of that. This was the one that is in my head constantly.
I don't know why I resisted Mario so much, because it is probably the best music in gaming and the best sound effects in gaming as well. I would have gone with the traditional like like if it were from Super Mario World. Because that song, which when I heard this, it blew my fucking mind. That song is the song that's used for pretty much every other song in every area of the game, including like Bowser's Castle. It's just sped up or slowed down in order to achieve a different effect, like making it scary. Yeah. So if you really spread that song out, that cheery little song that I heard, it becomes scary, and that's what plays. Or dun 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 dun. The song slow down?
I know it's just stretched out a little bit. I would have loved to chose you could have chose so many different ones, but the boss's level felt ominous. It felt serious. It's like, guys, no more joking around here. We got to do this thing. I'm knocking on the door.
I know underground was scary. This is even scarier. There's giant wooden blocks.
I'm looking up. I'm looking in. Here we go. Let's do this thing. Super Mario was the last one. Super Mario World specifically. Overworld to Underground.
I love that. I love that one. Do we want to go through and read through our lists and then maybe give some honorable mentions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so I had at my number 5, Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty, 4, Disco Elysium, 3, GTA Vice City, 2, Death's Door, 1, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time.
I had Last of Us, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, Pokemon, First Generation Red and Blue, Super Mario World, and Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
Amazing. Want to go through some either notable omissions or honorable mentions?
Yeah, no Death Stranding for you, eh?
So Death Stranding was there, but there's 2 elements to it. One, there are too many songs. There are so many songs, and not all of them have anything to do with the game. They're just kind of songs that play as like you choose to have them playing as you go, because Kojima just wanted them all in there. And I wanted to, like I said, limit the number of games that just had real songs in them. So I chose Vice City over Death Stranding for that reason.
I see. Okay. Yeah. That was going to be number 5. That was the one it was going to replace?
It was going to replace, it would have replaced Vice City.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right. Ones that I wanted to choose for different reasons, Crazy Taxi.
Oh, yeah.
But that kind of got filled by Tony Hawk, and I think Tony Hawk's the more iconic of the two.
Crazy Taxi was one as well that I thought about putting on, except it really only had like 3 songs, and they did kind of drive you nuts after a while.
Yeah. The Offspring would be the one that you'd say from now on, for sure. One of the ones I wanted to say too was in a very different way than what you're saying about Death Stranding was Fortnite. And because they have created hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of original songs that are just for this game, with vocals and with like everything, different styles of music. And I find that to be so impressive.
Yeah, for sure.
And every time I open the game, it's something new. And I'm always like, oh yeah, remember that song? That was when the aliens were in it. Okay, yeah, that was crazy. And it is this weird timestamp of a game that I find to be impressive. But the problem is, much like you were saying about there's just too many songs. There's just too many songs. Yeah. I can't look at it as a whole piece anymore because it's just too much.
I didn't have this on my list of honorable mentions, but Overwatch I have to give a nod to as well, because that's, you hear that song all the time. It's also incorporated in different like telltale elements of the game, where the game's starting out and the soundtrack changes a bit, or speed, or like gets a little bit louder and anthemic and orchestral when big things are happening. That kind of thing does a really good job of that.
My next one I was gonna say was Donkey Kong Country, written by David Wise.
Yes,
I don't know why it's not on my list.
People are gonna be really upset that Donkey Kong Country isn't on our list.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Man, it's so good. Do you want to go back and forth? Or you
Sure.
want me to
Yeah. I had another one that I left off because it's just all real songs, but that really did work well for me was BioShock. I think you can't have BioShock without that soundtrack.
See, you say BioShock. The one I would have said is BioShock Infinite.
Okay. Yeah.
The way that they took songs that already existed, and brought it back to, let's say, the 20s, but like kind of like a bluegrassy style thing. And like the one that I would say, and the one I've listened to many, many times, is a vocal only version of Jesse Carolina's Fortunate Song by CCR.
Oh,
is so good.
Yeah.
And it's so scary. And once again, another game that music is part of the story.
Yes.
Because when you walk off the thing and you hear God Only Knows by the Beach Boys by a barbershop quartet.
Yes.
Except it's 60 years before that song is supposed to be written, or 40 years before that song is supposed to be written, it freaks you the fuck out.
It's scary.
And it's actually so scary. Good. And that's like a way to use music as part of the game. So yeah.
It was great. That is probably the choice because of the way, like you said, with The Last of Us, again, I'll use that as an example, the music fits into the mechanics of the game itself.
Absolutely. That was Jim Boney who did BioShock Infinite.
I will have Fallout as well. For similar reason to BioShock, I didn't have it included, but the Fallout soundtrack, take your pick, 4, 3, New Vegas, whatever it is, such an iconic group of songs that I still listen to that soundtrack all the time.
Jet Set Radio. Hideki Nagoma. I thought that movie, that game does not work without music. Music is like an element of the game. That was a really hard cut too. That was on the list for a very long time.
That's a great one. Weirdly notable omission, any Dark Souls or Bloodborne games.
I was going to say.
I know they have fantastic soundtracks, and I know they do a lot to kind of increase your involvement and your awareness of your surroundings and all that stuff, but I don't resonate with it as much as everyone else does. I don't listen to those soundtracks outside of the game itself, and I thought that would be an odd. But if I did, it would be Majula. The Majula theme from Dark Souls 2 would be the one I would go for.
Majula date. Yes. The other one that I wanted to choose was Halo. Between the choral singing that is so unique in gaming. I thought was really impressive.
But it's sad though that nowadays it's not. I don't want to get political again, but it's not. It's not choral singing anymore. It's bleached choral singing. That's the only kind you can get.
Why? Wow. Okay, really?
Because the environment. Greta was right about that.
Yeah, she was.
How dare you?
How dare me?
How dare you?
What the hell did I do?
Well, have you ever shopped at H&M?
Yes.
How dare you?
Yeah, that's a good point. Are you wearing any H&M currently?
Yeah, probably a lot. Probably most of it.
Fast fashion. It is actively one of those things that I am so aware I'm doing something wrong, and yet I'm like, well,
if
give me more money.
If what it takes to save the world is me not wearing fast fashion, goodbye world.
I was gonna say, well, it was a good run.
Guess what? I can't afford real fashion.
Oh God. Well, there's so many more we could have listed. And like. This is one of those ones where please let us know what we missed, because there are so many, no one's wrong in this one. There is so much good music out there, and we could do this so many more times. So thank you so much for listening. Best soundtracks, man, that was pretty good. What was the other one I was going to say that I think you're missing, but I don't know. We'll get to it in the comments.
Sorry. It was Streets of Rage.
That was the other one.
Yeah. Streets.
That's the other vinyl.
Yes, that's the other vinyl that I have. That was a massive honorable mention for me as well.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Well, we love every single one of you, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. My name's Andrew Baskin, and with me, as always, is the mustache daddy of podcasting, Mr. M. Dop himself,
Mikey Aaronworth.
M. Dop. This is the Retrograde Podcast.
Game over.
This is getting weird.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
I walk around kind of hard all the time.